G'day and welcome to another episode of Masterclass Working Sheepdog Training. My name's Tully Williams, and in today's episode I'm going to attempt to condense a great part of the art and science of sheepdog handling into one easy to remember 9-word phrase. And I guarantee if you remember and apply this process, you will see dramatic improvements in your training. Now, most likely, if you've been around sheepdogs for any length of time, you will have heard about the concept of pressure on, pressure off when training sheepdogs. You might also have heard it referred to as pressure release training, or if you want to get scientific, you've probably also heard about negative reinforcement. Now, in my view, this pressure release technique is actually the main component of sheepdog handling, and of horse training, and of livestock handling. And whether we realise it or not, it's something we do the majority of the time when we're training or handling our dogs, or when we're working stock. But like most things, we can do this pressure on, pressure off well, or we can do it badly. And generally speaking, it's only the very best handlers who actually apply this technique to anywhere near its potential. And usually it's taken them, like me, years of trial and error to learn to apply these techniques well. But today I want to help you to shortcut that whole learning process by giving you a short, easy to remember phrase that I've developed over the last few years to help when teaching sheepdog training. And what I've tried to do is to condense a large amount of experience and knowledge and various principles of training into one short, easy to remember process. And if you apply this process as I describe it, you will see great results in your training. The first result you'll see is that your training will be much quicker and easier. You'll be amazed at how quickly your dog will learn if you apply this well. And the second result is that you'll end up with much better control and obedience. Or to put that the opposite way, if you do this pressure on, pressure off training poorly, then your training will be slower and more frustrating than necessary, and you'll end up with far less control and obedience. But before I get into the finer details of applying this pressure on, pressure off, I'll just quickly go over the basics for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept of pressure release type training. So basically, if we give a command and our dog doesn't respond, we apply an uncomfortable pressure to the dog, perhaps by growling at it or blocking it until it responds, and then we stop growling at it in order to remove that pressure, and thereby we reward the dog for doing what we've asked. So at the most basic level of pressure release training, we apply pressure until the dog responds to it, and then we release that pressure. The initial motivation for the dog to listen to us and to obey us is to make that pressure go away. And ultimately, the motivation for the dog is to avoid that pressure being applied in the first place. So this pressure is generally applied in one of three ways. The first way is verbal, the second is through body language, and the third is physical. So we apply verbal pressure by growling the command in a stern tone of voice. At the same time, we might also apply a body language type pressure by moving towards the dog or by getting in front of it to block it, and possibly by tapping our training stick on the ground in front of it or something of that nature. If it still doesn't respond, we might move on to physical pressure by putting pressure with our hand on the dog's withers until it lies down. So let's look at a video clip taken from the episode on introducing the sit down on sheep to get a quick idea of what this pressure release type training looks like. Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down, just keep the pressure on him, sit down, keep blocking him, sit down, 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 sit down. Good boy. Take the pressure off when he does. Go back. That's the way. Good boy. So there you can see the pressure on, pressure off method being applied. We apply pressure until the dog does what we ask, and then we release that pressure. And in the episode on teaching sit down before we get to sheep, you would have seen the application of physical pressure. If you haven't, you can check out that episode. So now that we've had a bit of a recap on the basics of pressure release type training, I'll outline the 9-word phrase that I've developed, which encapsulates the high quality application of this pressure release technique in 5 steps, and then I'll explore it point by point in more detail. So the phrase is